de morido. Acá no morido, medio no que pueda más que anima. Ya guay va a morir por gote. Yin, mire. Pero magale ver que yin, vi morir que. Ah, mana que. Ini apa ni que bota. Ini lah mana. Yin ini. Bota ni ada ni mana. Tengah cepat.
Nate Saint, one of MAF's first missionary pilots, moved to Ecuador with his family in the late 1940s. He established a base in Shell on the edge of the Amazon jungle. In 1956, Nate, along with missionaries Jim Elliott, Roger Udarian, Peter Fleming, and Ed McCulley, ventured into Waorani territory to attempt friendly contact with the tribe and share the message of Christ. The Waorani were known for their violence and for spearing outsiders who entered their territory. The missionaries set up camp on a river beach near a Waorani village. They shared gifts with the members of the tribe and tried to communicate with them. However, there was a misunderstanding, and a spearing party came to the beach and killed the 5 men. A few years later, Nate's sister Rachel and Jim's widow Elizabeth came to live with the members of the Waorani who had killed the missionaries. Instead of seeking revenge, they showed forgiveness and shared Christ's love. Many in the tribe followed their example, becoming believers and breaking their cycle of violence. The program here in Ecuador began back in 1948 when Nate Saint came here. He was at that time flying for missionaries that were working out in the jungles, the Amazon basin. This part of the world is still very isolated. There are no roads going out to the airships that we serve. Light plane transport for all of those people that live out in the jungle is very, very important. It's a way for them to be connected to medical help, to educational services, to all the things that many of us just take for granted.
When I first came, there was no health care available at all, no vaccines. It was a lot more difficult than it is now. MAF continues to fly. They are bringing out patients and they're flying in doctors.
In 2009, Alas de Socorro del Ecuador took over from MAF, took over all the flight operations and maintenance operations. It's our privilege to partner with mission groups, churches, the local believers in the different villages that we serve. It's definitely a new era here, but the work is much the same as always.
My parents were missionaries in Ecuador, and so growing up I always knew about MAF. I always knew about Nate Saint, who flew a little yellow airplane around the jungle. I would come down to Shell, sweep the hangar, load the airplanes, weigh up the load, fuel the airplanes, any kind of helping work to get a ride in the airplane. When I was young, I felt the call to use aviation in the jungle to build the church. So I joined MAF and I spent 22 years in Ecuador doing just that. I'm pretty excited to be back in Shell, to see how the church has been growing, and to see how the story of the Waorani continues today.
Today we're outbound from Shell. We're heading to a community called Sapino, which is a Waorani community. Our plan is to fly in with Jean Jordan and Gilberto Ninkimo, who is the grandson of Minkay Ninkimo, one of the abuelos, one of the grandfathers, who was involved in the spearing of Nate Saint and his friends back in 1956. Then we're going to move over to another community where one of the other abuelos, the grandfathers, still lives. His name is Dewey. Just share a little bit about what ALIS is doing, what MAF is doing, and for them to share what's going on in their lives and their own ministries that they're involved in. For having such a history of violence, they are a super open, warm community now, and usually are very quick to joke and laugh. So it's always fun to go into a Waorani community.
Gilberto and I used to fly. He would fly with me as a camp kid, as a little kid. And he remembers that we would push the airplane down and make it go a little weightless, and he would scream, but they'd want to do it again and again and again. And it was through the camp experience that Gilberto decided he wanted to be a preacher, a missionary, and a teacher.
Cuando ya me faltaba 3 días para terminar mi seminario en 2 años en Cuenca, me sentí el llamado de regresar a mi pueblo. En el momento que sentí el llamado, comencé a pensar en las predicaciones, a mirar a la juventud, a mirar a mi pueblo, el contexto del cambio y de la cultura.
The dramatic night and day change of that first generation was tremendous. But the second generation grew up in a peaceful atmosphere. They had schooling, they had clearings, they didn't have to flee. There wasn't the urgency, there wasn't the need. A lot of times, things seem to be going well and you don't need God. And I think that may be what's happening to some of this generation. They're getting their education, they all have cell phones, their life has changed dramatically. But all of us still need the Lord, no matter what we might appear on the outside.
Toma, estaba en el pollo, ahí China en verano. Mani vete, allá que era anillo, estaba anillo verano China. Mani que está en pie, mani pa, guardar ya tú bate, bueno. Era de cora mai. Ini di sini ni mah, botang pun mesti ada mewarisi, warisi apa? Ini di sini ada ni botang mesti ni, ada jadi ini berita berita.
Muchas de las personas se pierden su fe por el tema de que no hay un empuje, no hay un acompañamiento. Entonces, mi entorno del llamado ahora es trabajar en empujar, acompañar, ver los temas específicos para que no suceda más allá. Yo y mi hermano, que somos de la tercera generación, poder entender más el Evangelio y llevar, anunciar a todo el territorio, incluyendo a grupos no alcanzados.
Ayudar con la iglesia, con los jóvenes. Cuando estamos unidos, hablamos qué estamos haciendo, cómo podemos llegar a esta meta, cómo queremos ayudar a nuestro pueblo. Todo para mí es mi gente ayudar.
I don't know where the Guarani tribe would be today without Gilberto, because he serves his people. He has 2 cell phones and they're constantly ringing, and he never, I don't care what he's involved in, he stops and takes those phone calls. There's Guarani that are in prison right now for a killing that they took part of with an unreached Guarani group. I really can't go in that prison, but he can. He does not have deep pockets. He doesn't have any money, but he goes and he travels. You certainly see in his actions, he cares for his people.
En la cultura, antes de conocer el Evangelio, mataban entre hermanos. Ahora, cuando entró el Evangelio, se ha mostrado el amor en la familia. Nuestro abuelo, Micaye, conoció, después de haber actuado la matanza, este amor tan grande de Dios, que hoy este amor nos ha mostrado a nuestra familia ante la sociedad y ante el pueblo.
Nosotros empezamos las cruces cuando empezaron a venir a reconstruir o remodelar la casa de Saint. Nosotros pensamos qué podemos hacer con esas tablas o con esas maderas que están botando de gana. es muy importante porque no es simplemente una cruz o una madera de muchos años. Esto representa mucho para nosotros.
Cada vez que yo hago las cruces, pienso entre los 6 que participaron y los 5 que murieron. La pisada de aquellos hombres que dejaron en la playa en el año de 1956 es un gran ejemplo y un gran reto. Entre yo y mi hermano siempre hacemos y pensamos. Los cruces siempre nos han dado una ventaja de sobresalir mi familia y también de viajar en los ministerios con los recursos que ganamos. Son 53 comunidades ubicadas en 3 provincias. Tengo que estar viajando casi todo el pueblo. Pero gracias a Dios estoy en una cooperación de llevar el audio. Apoyo muy poco a la iglesia local. Es decir, casi 70% del pueblo guaraní no sabe leer la Biblia, no sabe escribir. Uno de los mejores regalos que yo he visto hasta hoy día es de haber grabado este audio. Y yo creo que va a ser el mayor impacto para toda la comunidad de guaraní.
Muy bien, y pempoga, empoque, me agarró que nengue, y diga, da aquí pote, me agarró que segundo vayan a
Cristian antera ante, Mateo nano watape ante yemangainda, Mateo capítulo 1. Tomen añumo, Abraham uri, venga ne ingainga ente, abre David uri, venga muno, nunga inga kaimba, tomen a wemei
Alas de Socorro and MAF will continue to work here in Ecuador as long as the gospel needs to be taken to remote places, as long as people need help. We hope that we'll be able to be God's hands and feet here in this place.
I feel like my whole life is much richer and that I have learned far more from them than they have learned from me.
Their story is so famous. It started back in '56 with the death of the 5 missionaries on the beach. And unfortunately, so much of the world, I think, kind of leave those guys on the beach and leave the Guarani at that timeline. One of our visions is that the world sees the Guarani for who they are today, and that there are generations now of believers, and I know that God is not done with them.
La transición que va a ir de mí es a mi hijo o a mi hija, quienes deben continuar con el Evangelio. Porque la historia no va a terminar en mi hijo, sino la historia va a continuar más allá. La historia no es de mi abuelo, la historia es de Dios.
Cuando yo estaba en la escuela, veía que Alas de Socorro estaba volando. Mi meta era que quería ser piloto. No solo mi gente, sino alrededor del mundo. Yo quiero ser misionero, ir a ayudar a la gente lo que necesitan por medio de aviación.
After a day like today, when you're with someone like Gene, people are talking about the long history of MAF and Alas de Socorro working in Ecuador, but you realize you're just one small part of the work that's been going on and that people that God has been using for generations. Makes you think, what legacy will I leave behind? What lives have I impacted? Very easy to get caught up day to day in flying the airplane. But at the end of the day, that's not what we're going to be remembered for, is how well we flew the airplane. They'll thank us for that service, but at the end, we want to be remembered for the lives that we touched. What kind of foundation are we leaving for them?
Hoy en día, la lanza fue reemplazada por la Biblia. Es utilizada para rescatar las almas, no para matar. Ahora mi pueblo tiene una nueva esperanza de vivir.
decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back.